Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty.
That was the beautiful voice of Jada Holiday at Baylor University. Lift every voice and sing. I love listening to all these different versions, and I cannot wait till we can all sing together again. Friends, we are at it again, once again, to lift our voices and join the song that is the quest for social justice, for equity, for true freedom, for freedom from oppression and injustice of the systems of race in the United States, in Germany, and wherever they are in the world. On behalf of American Church in Berlin, welcome. My name is Denise Banks-Grasedyck, and as the curator and the director of the talks, I have once again the honor of leading us through this first part of our Walk the Talk initiative, the Initiative for Social Justice. Our goal is to stand together with our brothers and sisters to overcome the struggles and the injustices that are so prevalent in the world and that are so damaging to our society. And at this time, we're focusing on solidarity and support for our Black sisters and brothers, those who are suffering under systems of race and systems that are so deeply woven into our society that we often are shocked by what we find as we seek truth and understanding. And so as we work together to do what must be done to bring about a society that is equitable and just for all people, we thank you for joining us this morning. If it's your first time, would you mind, please raise your hand so we can give you a big welcome. Wonderful. It's great to see some new faces this morning.
Everybody else comes weekly?
This happens once a week on Saturdays.
Coming weekly?
Yes, yes, we've been waiting for you. Exactly. Our group is growing as you grow and go out and tell your friends and invite people in the community, because what our goal is to raise our awareness, raise our understanding right here where we are. Sometimes we can have this big idea that we want to change the world and we want to go out and tell everyone and make something happen, and we miss the opportunity that's right at the end of our arms, at arm's length, so to say. And so that's what we're here to do, is to raise awareness, to start conversations, and to give us new ideas for ways of thinking and being. So let us take just a moment to get very present, to prepare our hearts and our minds for this discussion. We want to prepare to walk the talk of actively loving our neighbors, our brothers and sisters, just as each of us has been created. So I invite you to join me. Close your eyes if you like, and take a deep breath like you are breathing in the most beautiful scent, and just hold it for a moment. And slowly exhale. Take another deep breath, just taking in beauty and possibility. And as you exhale, let go of the idea that you can't change anything, that one person can't make a difference, and open up to the possibility that this is exactly where you're supposed to be to help us on this journey. I want you to just know that this is a safe space of love and respect for every one of us, just as our Creator made us to be. So set your intention for what it is you hope to experience and leave this place with today. And stay there for just a moment. And when you're ready, open your eyes. Imagine for a moment It is a hot summer day, an unusually hot summer day, kind of like today in Berlin. There's a summer party at a kindergarten. There are 20 little kids hopping and jumping and laughing and springing through the water in their swimsuits. There's a lawn sprinkler going, laughing, catch me, catch me. And suddenly, stop, stop, turn off the water. One of the children screams. It's 4-year-old Benny. He is shouting, he's panicked, hysterical. Someone leaps up to turn off the water. 20 pairs of eyes search. Is it my child? What's wrong, Benny? Benny points to my son, DJ. Turn off the water. The color's coming off of DJ. For the first time, Benny has noticed that the soles of my son's feet are not brown like the rest of his skin, and he thinks the water is washing off the color. All of the adults just break into laughter, relieved that no child is hurt, except Benny, tears welling up in his eyes. And I go to comfort him. I say, Benny, it's okay. And he said, it's not funny. If the color comes off, he won't be DJ. And I realized in that moment, it still makes me emotional. I saw how beautiful the world can be when we realize that everything about us is what makes us so beautiful. It's not a barrier. It's not a danger. Being who you are, whatever that is what makes you who you are. And I saw how wonderful the world would be if we all just saw with our hearts like Benny did, instead of stopping at the skin color. Which brings us to our topic this morning, stereotyping. How is stereotyping used in systems of race? And what is stereotyping? The stereotypes are they're oversimplified generalizations about groups of people. They can be based on our ethnicity, they can be based on our skin color, they can be based on sexual orientation, on just about anything. If you can identify it, someone can create a stereotype about it. And they might be positive, usually when you're talking about your own group, and they are more often negative when you're talking about the other. In either case, this generalization, it doesn't take our individual differences into account. And that's what really makes it problematic. So it's also a tool in the system of race. It means that we're accepting a set of beliefs that has become widespread, often because the generalizations are repeated over and over again. And they're reinforced by our culture, by our media, by our society. And both negative and positive stereotypes, they create a certain perception. And that perception, a person's perception, is their reality. So the negative stereotype of black as representing bad, evil, something to be feared, and the positive stereotype, for example, of white as representing good, goodness, and benevolence are like the original stereotypes in the systems of race. And those of you who've been here week after week know that we started out somewhere on a ship crossing the ocean over 400 years ago. And some of those systems that were implemented then still exist. And for those of you who have been here before, we are going to have a little pop quiz. Yay! In one of our talks, we said systems of race are designed to do 4 things. Everyone, this is shy Sarah.
Demoralize, disenfranchise, dehumanize, and empower, disempower.
Yeah, woo! Exactly, thank you. Systems of race are designed to dehumanize, to disempower, to demoralize, and disenfranchise people. And why? Because it makes it easier to justify the injustice and makes it harder for those who are oppressed to break out of the system. Stereotyping is absolutely everywhere. What's the impact? In our society today, it can be difficult not to stereotype. In fact, since our prehistoric days, we have been doing it. Our brains are designed to categorize things. We need to put things together quickly. And that's one of the reasons we associate an idea with someone, with something that we've experienced before, or some image that has been transported to us, shared with us. And a lot of times that comes from whatever environment we're in. It's similar to programming our minds. In modern times, the perception is increasingly shaped and reinforced by different forms of media. Now, we won't be able to cover all of this today, so we're going to focus on just basically the stereotypes and mentioning the media, from books to films to movies, social media, and especially the news, more programming. So how much of an impact do you think that this has on us? Huge. Yeah. So what I'd like to do now is test that. Today's a big day for testing. So you're going to get a piece of paper. On that piece of paper, there are some statements. I would like for you to read the statement and fill in the blanks. So you're going to get a piece of paper and a pencil. Yes?
Is this the first thing that pops into our mind?
Yes. And
Even if we don't like the first thing that pops into our mind?
exactly. Now, this is interesting. And on that piece of paper, it says, this is probably going to make you uncomfortable. There's a good reason for that. This isn't whether you agree with it. This is, do you recognize it? Is it familiar to you? What I want you to understand is that being aware of a stereotype does not mean that you agree with it, or that you act on that, or that you act with prejudice toward other people. I heard it's too easy. There's a reason for that. So the point of the exercise, I would like for you to look at your responses, and now we're going to look at the answers that are going to go up on the slide. And when you see the answers on the slide, I would like for you to put your hands up if you got more than 5 right. Did you get 5 or more right? Okay, keep your hands up. More than 6. More than 7? More than 8? Anyone get all of them? All 9 of them? Yeah, okay. So the point of this exercise is not to make you feel bad. It is to point out how prevalent stereotypes are. And whether we buy into them or not, they're constantly being reinforced. So every time you see a news report and a certain group of people is presented in a certain light and you recognize those stereotypes, that message is being reinforced. When we realize how prevalent they are, we have the power to change something. Negative stereotypes have negative consequences. And the trouble with stereotypes is that even if we have a positive stereotype, it can lead to negative consequences. So what are some examples that you can think of where a positive stereotype might lead to a negative consequence?
Number 5, for example.
Exactly. Yeah, number 5. So In our example, a positive stereotype is that police are generally, they're heroes, they're protectors, helpers, servers. And while this may be true for very many police officers as a stereotype, it can contribute to the denial of wrongdoing, of abuse, of brutality, and it leads to disbelief in the intent to harm, even when we see a police officer kneel on a man's neck until he is dead, and it's recorded. Stereotypes can lead us to think, maybe he didn't mean to do it. Okay? That's just one example. Stereotyping impacts how others see us, and it impacts how you see yourself and the group of people to which you belong. And it is that view that also is the perception that leads to how you are treated and how you treat others. So when we think about the system of race, what are some of the stereotypes that Black people might face in the areas of their professional lives and work? How might stereotypes be at play there?
I don't know, something like being less likely to be hired because you have a non-white sounding name.
Right. Might have a Black sounding name, and that would prevent you from getting hired or promoted. And when we look back over from the very beginning when we talked about this, we see that these were measures that were put in place a long time ago, even going back to the time when Black people couldn't choose their names and were made to choose a different name. And we move that forward. That is why it is often now a freedom of an expression of such freedom. What might be another stereotype that would hinder someone in their professional life at work?
There's the stereotype of like the angry Black woman.
The angry Black woman.
And so, well, but so like in your professional life, you might get tone policed a lot more often, where like you're in meetings and you're speaking at the same volume as all of your white colleagues or whatnot, but somehow you're seen as angrier.
Harris has already got that label. He hasn't even started work yet. I'm trying.
Right, exactly. Right now we see this with the VP running mate, that she's getting policed and chastised in a way that we saw it as a woman, and then we add on the color factor, and that just turns up the volume on that stereotyping. How might stereotypes impact health and medical care?
I've seen that this is being addressed, but health practices have been developed particularly for folks with white skin, and sometimes those symptoms aren't documented and taught for folks with colors, whose colored skin is not as light. So that could be an impact. Like I said, I've seen healthcare providers providing resources to that, to address that, but that is one example I can think of.
Absolutely. You aren't even considered for some things. The research is directed at the majority. Another, go ahead.
I read a report that was really upsetting because it was an illness that I had myself, and a Black woman came to the emergency room with a very painful leg and was dismissed as malingering, and she actually had a severe blood clot and died of the blood clots. It was diagnosed in me. I mean, it's hard to diagnose, but they looked for it, and then they found it.
Right.
So I read that, and it's just,
So do you know that there are a number of stereotypes that could be at play in this particular example? One is, first of all, it's not a priority. The other is, there's the stereotype of the Black person being basically physically stronger. They can take more. And again, if we go back to our historical examples, this was set up a long time ago, and it's just taken on different forms. So she comes in complaining, I've got severe pain, I need to be seen now. Go in the waiting room. The woman dies 15 minutes later from something that could possibly have been treated. And another way that stereotypes work is, for example, a black man goes into the hospital, needs care. They can't figure out what's wrong with him. They run multiple AIDS tests. They question what is going on in his personal life, and his wife is there, and they're saying, well, are you sure you're not homosexual on the side? And he's fairly sure that he's not, and his wife is hoping that he's not. And it's this focus on, well, if it's not that, well, then you must be using some sort of drugs. What kind of drug? You have to tell us what drugs you're using. This is a real case. And it was none of those things. And it wasn't until the wife said, what would you do if a white man came in with these symptoms? Treat him for that. Look for that. And that is what saved this man's life. So moving on to systems of race in our justice system. How might stereotypes impact that? I think we should have lots to talk about right now.
I got to step back a bit here. You had those 4 reasons, those what's typical and so on. You kind of bunch them together, and I always see a class struggle, upper class versus lower class. Mm-hmm. And this disenfranchising and so on, you can kind of see that's a problem between classes. With the health care, you don't treat blacks because you don't think they might not be able to pay their bill. You know, they're poorer. And here also in justice, too. Yeah, poor people tend to get more involved in crime than rich people. At least more violent crime or whatever, just generally. And blacks happen to have a larger percentage of poor persons in their groups than whites, okay, generally. So, okay, you're seeing black and you kind of associate them with poor and poor with crime.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, across the whole line. Yes, class is an issue, and if we then take it back and say we've got 2 poor people, a black person, a white person, then there's a different level of discrimination that comes in. Okay. What else in the system of justice? There are statistics and there are multiple studies that show that a black man is more than, depending on where you live, is at least 5 times more likely to be stopped by the police for nothing. I have been stopped by the police here in this country, just walking down the, I was at the train station, and hi, I'd like to see your ID. And I said, hi, I'd like to see your ID. You got it. But first, you've got to be in a position to counter that and to realize you don't just get to stop me anytime you like. And granted, I wasn't too worried that I was going to be hog-tied and have someone kneel on my neck in that moment. It's also much more likely that someone who is black is seen as a threat, which is why force is often immediately used. It was the case with 12-year-old Tamir Rice. It's a 12-year-old boy. He looked threatening. You got trained police officers, and he looked threatening. He was so threatening that within 2 seconds of their arrival, they shot him dead. No warning. That's how threatening, that's how dangerous stereotypes are. And I just read a study, the taller a black man is, the more likely he is to be encountered as a threat and to be treated as, to be treated with, or to encounter violence, sorry. Okay, media and representation. Since stereotyping is everywhere and it influences negative impacts on the system of race. How can we counter all this programming that so massively impacts every area of a Black person's life, people of color? And the reason this is, I'd like for you, whenever I say people of color, and whenever I say Black people, I'd like for you to also imagine any other marginalized group.
Any other what?
Any other marginalized group, any other group of people that experiences massive discrimination. Because what our hope is that we're starting a conversation about this. The catalyst was the death of George Floyd and all of the protests surrounding that, but it's not isolated by no means. And so if we can understand how these systems work, and we can start dismantling one of them, if we can figure that out, we can figure out the rest of them too. So we have to look to the power and the influence of media, and we have to demand that what we see is equitable, it's positive, it's accurate representation of Black people in the media. And when I say media, and it's a huge field, and we cannot cover that in the remaining time that we have, I always get excited, and I'm like, and we're gonna talk about this, and I'm like, Denise, focus, baby. All right, focus. So we have to demand, for example, that when the news comes on, the first thing that you hear is not the Black shooter, the Black man who, if you pay attention to how things are positioned, listen to what you're hearing. Stereotypes are they're being thrown at us. You will hear the accused. Then you already know that is not a Black person. The suspect. If race is not mentioned, it is not a Black person. And we have to start paying attention to those things because they seep into our subconscious. Why does that matter so much? It matters because even if something is not true, studies show that the more you repeat it, the more people tend to believe it is true. Why is that? That is because we look, in times of uncertainty, when we don't know something, we look around us. What do my peers say? What does my network say? If they're saying it too, okay, I'm gonna trust it. I'm gonna move with this. And this is why I get absolutely nutty when my friends' family post things. They repeat and they go, I can't believe the person said, look what they said, all these horrible things. I'm like, stop giving it a platform. It's okay to address it, but don't forward it. Address it in your own words. Because every time it gets shown, every time it gets repeated, it can be a blatant lie. The more people share it, the more it becomes a reality. Representation matters. Why? Some of you may have heard, if you can see it, you can be it. And I like this representation of empower like Michelle Obama, because for so many little girls who started out looking, wait a minute. Anyway, for so many little girls who are brown and Black, that is the representation of something very positive, of a smart, intelligent, strong human being making her way in the world. And if you see enough of that, you have to see something. You have to at least be told that it exists in order to have a picture of it for yourself, to think that it's possible. And if representation matters, repetition matters more. It is not enough to have one or two positive examples of famous people, celebrities. Just like we see regular people in professions, doctors, nurses, just intact families, relationships that are working, everything across the board, just like the rest of the world, we need to see that kind of representation in the media and what we share on social media. The more we see it, the more we believe it again. So now that we know about stereotyping and the connection to injustice in the system of race and in media, the famous question that I ask week after week is, what will you do about it? How will you walk the talk? These talks are a starting point. They are intended to be conversation starters, bridges to open dialogue, something to give you some insight and some tools to ask more questions, things that you can share with people. And one of the things that we do is, for each talk, we create what I call a resource kit. And this resource kit is a document. It's got a bunch of links to all kinds of material that are designed to increase your awareness, to expand your knowledge, because the more you know, the better able you're going to be discerning, to think for yourself. So we need to educate and re-educate and reprogram ourselves and our families and our friends about the very real damage that is done by stereotyping and misrepresentation. There are a couple of things that you can watch. There are some films, there are some suggestions. One is a great TED talk called The Danger of a Single Story. Another is, and a couple of these are, this is my watch, says it takes 5 minutes. What would you do? And it's a video of, I don't know if some of you know this series of, they set up 2 people stealing bikes. Black, white, and it's interesting, watch it. And there's another movie called, a very old movie from 1961, Black Like Me, where a journalist went undercover, a white journalist, and he basically turned himself black during the Jim Crow era with the help of a doctor and some medications and UV light. And what he experienced was absolutely devastating. Because it's one thing to hear someone talk about what they're experiencing, and it's another thing to experience it where you cannot mitigate. Well, maybe it was this, or maybe you said, or maybe you looked, or maybe you did this. You just showed up in your black skin, and that was enough. And he talks about one incident where he couldn't take it anymore, and he hid. You know, it's very, very, very powerful. And there are some book suggestions. One from an article from the Smithsonian about Black Like Me, talking about 50 years later. And it's kind of shocking to see how many things are still so relevant. Sarah?
Representation is so important, but then it's also important who's behind the camera and who's kind of directing it all. And obviously, if it's someone who's more prone to have these stereotypes themselves, it'll create a whole different picture of what they're showing on camera. And this is just as a question, me as someone who is white, you know, how would I best try to use my presence while still keeping in mind that obviously there will be some viewpoints that I have that might be bad to, you know, show to the world. I mean, how can I best filter myself and my stereotypes while still trying to say something that isn't good?
Mm-hmm. So I think I've understood. So how do you look at yourself and know that every one of us has biases? Again, in the resource kit, there is if you haven't done it yet, figure out what your biases are. There's a test for helping you to kind of figure that out. And always being sure that when you present these things and address them, you know, this is how I see it from my experience. Let your experience be your experience. Let someone else's experience be their experience, and know that we're all growing and learning about ourselves and about each other. And this is I would say, a very new era because of all the access that we have to information that we didn't have before. It was purposely, specifically not available or hidden or distorted. And now you've got so many sources that if you just cull it all in, you're going to be able to get a better, fuller picture of what actually is. So we've come to the end of our time. I know you're all excited to get out and do the walk, our peaceful protest walk. I have to say thank you to the rest of the team. Tom is going to be leading us through the walk, and for Eben for documenting this so that we can make it available to more people. And I think this is the key. None of us in this room created this. And you know, even the people out there who we may look at it and say, okay, we're not going to say you're a racist because we learned about that, right? They are also part of a system of race, of miseducation. And so if we try to meet them where they are and say, you know, this is what I know to be truth, and look at it as we're all part of this now, and there's just this one humanity that we have, so we can work together to make it a place where we can all feel safe and loved and free and experience justice, or we can keep going the way we're going. That has not worked out well. So I would love to continue. We know that this is a short time to get a lot of information out there. Thank you so much for participating, and let us all go out and sing with our mask on and lift our voices and make way for the justice and the peace and the equity that we want to bring about.